Welcome back to BHookedCrochet.com. I'm your host Brittany. In this tutorial I'm going to demonstrate how to crochet the bobble stitch, and particularly the bobbles in a row. The bobble stitch is really great for projects that you need a lot of texture, or if you need a thick fabric, so pot holders, rugs. You can actually make blankets out of these and they look really cool. For this demonstration I'm going to be using Red Heart with Love and a size 6.5mm crochet hook. However, the bobble stitch is very versatile and you can use any weight yarn and any hook that coordinates with that yarn in order to accomplish this look. To begin the bobble stitch, we just need to start off with a slip knot. And for your foundation chain, we need to make it so that it's any odd number, and then we're just going to add one chain to that. So for this demonstration, I will chain 25, and then I'll add one chain to the end. Now if you're following along with the written instructions, we're going to be moving on to row 1. You can also consider this to be your foundation row. So to begin our foundation row, we're going to skip this first chain here that's right next to our hook, and we just want to make one single crochet into every chain. Now we're ready to begin row 2. Row 2 is the first row of our 2-row pattern repeat, and so the written instructions say that this is row 2. We will go ahead and chain 3 and turn our work. And now you want to locate the very first stitch. So it's the stitch where this chain 3 is coming from, would have been the last single crochet that you made. And so you can see this little opening, or if you look from the top, the V right there, showing that this is the first stitch. So this very first bobble on row 2 is going to be slightly different than all of the other ones because we're starting off with this chain of 3. So what we need to do is double crochet a cluster, and so we have this chain 3 counting as a double crochet. We need to have 4 more, so we want to have a total of 5 double crochets, a cluster. And so we just want to wrap the yarn, insert it into that first stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through 2. And instead of finishing off the double crochet, just leave that on your hook and move on to the next one. So you yarn over, insert hook, yarn over, and pull through 2. So as you can see, since we've counted this chaining of 3 as a stitch, we have 3 double crochets on our hook. We need 2 more. And now once you've got 5 loops on your hook for this first bobble only, then we'll yarn over and pull through all 5 of those loops. Now it's going to be a little bit different for the remaining bobbles. We're going to have an extra loop on our hook. And so what we want to do at this point now, we've got this cluster, but if you look on the other side, we don't really have that bobble, that really poofy sort of appearance. And so what we need to do to create that is single crochet into the next stitch. And by doing that, so we're using a shorter stitch, and it pulls that big cluster downward, kind of pokes it out on the other side. So when we're working the bobble stitches, it's going to be an even row number, and we're always going to be working on the wrong side. So that's important if you're going to be designing your own patterns using this particular stitch, is that the side that you're working on is not the side that's going to have the texture. So sometimes you have to account for that. Now moving on, we want to create another double crochet cluster into the very next stitch. And so we're doing this exactly the same. The only difference is we don't have that chain 3. And so we want to make 5 of these double crochets, and when you have a total of 6 loops on your hook, then we'll be ready to finish up. Okay, so I've got 6 loops on my hook. You can go ahead and double count to make sure you have 5 double crochets, and you just want to yarn over and pull through all 6 of those loops, and then immediately single crochet into the next stitch. And that's essentially the pattern repeat for row 2. We just want to make a bobble stitch and make a single crochet, and we're just going to finish that all the way across until we've reached the end of our work. So if you did your foundation row correctly, you should end up with 1 stitch, so the very last stitch ending up being a bobble stitch. So we need that to work out in order for this pattern to work, or at least to have them sitting in a row. Okay, and so that finishes up row 2. Now we don't actually have a stitch to make a single crochet in like we did for all of the other ones, but the bobble actually maintains its shape pretty well. So we just want to continue on with row 3, so we want to chain 1. So row 3 is the second row in the pattern repeat, second and final row. So it's actually probably one of the more easiest. So you just want to single crochet into every stitch. And so the one thing you need to look out for is the stitches where you have your bobble. So as you can see, those stitches are longer, so there's a larger hole on the side. So sometimes it's easy to put 2 single crochets in one of those by mistake. So you just want to make sure, at least until you're used to it, that you only make 1 single crochet into every stitch, and sometimes it helps to count. And I assure you, if you mess this row up, you will figure it out on the next row, and you'll probably have to rip back. So if you don't have this number, the number of stitches, correct, then your bobbles will no longer sit on top of each other. They'll actually be in between one another. And that's a whole different pattern. I mean, a lot of times people will do that and it looks really cool. But for this particular pattern, we don't want that. Another thing you may be noticing, especially on mine here, is that when you're starting out, the bobble stitch, it likes to curl quite a bit. And so this is actually something that is corrected the longer your piece is or the larger your piece is. So the first few rows, you will notice quite a bit of curling, but don't be alarmed, it's completely normal. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll alternate colors either by each bobble row, or maybe they'll go 2 rows and then change the color. So if this is the case, if you're working on a project where you want to change colors, at the end of your single crochet rows, after you've made your bobble and then this foundation that kind of sits in between, this will be the time to change your yarn. So you would just go ahead and bind off here, and then you would chain up 3 and continue on with the next bobble row as normal. So at this point we're just going to repeat rows 2 and 3 until your project is as long as it needs to be. So we'll go through row 2 one more time. So this is row 2 of the pattern repeat. It's actually row 4 in the written instructions if you're following along. And so we again just need to chain 3. We'll find that first stitch there, and that's where we're going to work our first bobble stitch. And then we find the next stitch and just alternate a bobble stitch and a single crochet. Something you might want to do is, especially when you're brand new to this pattern, just take a look at the front or the right side of your work every so often and make sure that your bobbles are in the proper place. That way you don't have to rip out and start over on this row or another row. So I'm going to flip it real quick just so you can see how those bobble stitches are sitting right on top of each other rather than there being a bobble like in between like you would see here. So we want to make sure they're sitting like this. So once you've reached the end of your row, so this is where we've started our second row of bobbles, so it's going to look a little bit different because we're working now on this row that's below. So when you look at this here, it's really tempting to say that there's one stitch here and there's another stitch here, but in all reality that's not actually the case. So what you can do is flip it over to the other side, and you can see here that all of my bobbles are in fact in a row, so I know that my stitch count is correct. And if you look at it from the top, you can see that there's really just one complete V. So there's a V there, and this is just a loop. So this is basically just where we finished off this bobble from the row before. So basically the point that I'm getting at here is I've got my single crochet here. I want to make sure that my last stitch is a bobble stitch. Okay, and so we'll finish off that bobble stitch. We'll run through the next row, so this is row 5 for this particular swatch. It's actually row 3 if you're just following it based on the pattern repeats. So we just want to chain 1 and turn our work, and we'll single crochet once into every stitch. Okay, so this finishes up our second pattern repeat. So at this point we're going to conclude this demonstration. Now basically all you need to do is repeat rows 2 through 3 as you can find in the written instructions until your project is as long as you would like, and once you're finished of course you would bind off like normal. Please stay tuned for more free patterns and video tutorials including stitches just like this at BHookedCrochet.com.